Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. This episode being recorded on the 2nd of June 2017. So if you guys have been watching the weekly reviews recently, you know this time of year not a huge amount of news for me to report on. However, we did have something of some degree of significance this week, and that is a trade between the Browns and the Jets. Calvin Pryor, who has been on the trade block for a while now, has been in one of the rarest of trades, traded just straight up for another player, former Jet Demario Davis, the linebacker. I think this trade suits both teams with the double drafting in rounds 1 and 2 of safeties in New York. It was clear this was a team looking to move on from Pryor, who has been frankly a bust. He's been an absolute liability in coverage, big part of why that secondary was so poor last season. The Browns have a need at safety. Pryor was a first round draft pick. The physical skill set and talent is there. It's just not come together for him yet. I think this could be a good move for him. Fresh start sometimes is all a player needs, and sounds bizarre saying this after, looking at the Jets defense going into last season. The Browns look a far more talented unit at this point in time. And the Jets, they get themselves a middle linebacker. I think it's a position of need, someone who knows the system, has been with the team before. It's just getting something for Pryor that I think will help them is just an added bonus at this point. Deron Lee didn't have the greatest rookie season. David Harris is getting up there. It at least improves the depth of that group. So I think this is a better deal for the Browns than it is for New York, but I can see why New York have done it. Improves their depth. The Browns get someone who certainly has a good chance of being a starter next season. Other news with regards to the Browns, they've re-signed linebacker Christian Kirksey to a 4-year, $38 million deal. It's a bit of an overpay, but the Browns at this point in time, they've got money and they don't have a huge amount to spend it on. It's a very young roster. It's going to be a while until they have to start paying these guys. All the money's invested in the O-line at this point in time. Keeping him around, him and Jamie Collins now both well paid, but they're both good players. He's above average. He might not be great, but he's solid. So I think this is a perfectly reasonable signing. It's not a gross overpay or anything. It's just probably a little bit more than I may have expected the player to get. But when you're down there like the Browns, I think sometimes you have to pay that kind of money to maintain players. The only other thing I really want to discuss this week is this, what I consider a non-story with regards to the Seahawks, about Richard Sherman basically falling out with everyone and chewing out Russell Wilson. Whilst I do believe there's an element of truth to it, I've got no doubt, with Sherman's persona, that there's a degree of truth to that persona as to who Sherman actually is. That he probably has been saying these things, and I suspect he's probably said these things in front of the team, and everyone is aware that that's his opinion. I don't think it's a huge deal. The end of the day, most of these players are going to be smart enough to know Russell Wilson, if they're going to do anything in these next couple of years, it's going to be on his back at this point. I thought last year he performed admirably. If Sherman's going to critique him too heavily for that kind of performance behind that kind of O-line, really, that's what he should be on to account. The O-line sabotaged everything that offense was attempting to do last year. I don't see a huge amount of that being fixed. It does explain why Sherman was on the trade block. Possibly still is, although with the draft having come and gone, not sure there'd be anything that the Seahawks would consider. Frankly, I think the Seahawks would be in a pretty poor position defensively if they were to get rid of him, whilst they have looked to rebuild that secondary. The corner group does rely on him being present. I'm not sure they'd hold up brilliantly well without him. That said, they'd be it wouldn't be a disaster. The secondary's still got Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, and the front seven still pretty talented. But I wouldn't read too much into this. I think these issues aren't that have been brought to light. It's just shed a little bit more information on it, but I don't think it's anything truly shocking to anyone who has been following this team and anyone who knows Richard Sherman and his love for talking. So let's get down to the list. Top 10 interior linemen currently in the NFL. Now, this is a list that came with a lot of honourable mentions. A lot of good interior linemen, of course, and frankly, I couldn't get a lot of guys that I would have liked to have put on this list onto it. This includes guys like Leonard Williams, just needs to do it for a little bit longer. It's only been in the league for 2 seasons now. We've got Mike Daniels of the Packers. He's a fantastic player, big fan of his. I don't think he gets much help either along that defensive front. Benny Logan, I think he's a very good player. And also the big the big Ravens nose tackle, Williams, what's his first name? It's not Williams. Forget. Is it McKinney? Anyway, the Ravens nose tackle. I've just wrote Ravens nose tackle here, expecting myself to remember it, and what can I say? But we'll get to the list now. So honourable mentions, they're all really good players, big fan of all of theirs. They just couldn't quite cut the list. It's probably the most competitive of these lists that I have made. So, number 10 is Tennessee Titans defensive lineman Jarrell Casey. I remember when he was drafted, I was very impressed with him early on. He's only improved as his career's gone on. I think he's one of the most consistent, disruptive linemen in the NFL. Looks undersized, but he's very powerful, plays with great leverage. Then, he's played in both the 4-3 and the 3-4 to great effect. I think that shows a lot of talent and his just general ability to get penetration regardless of where they line him up. No real weakness in his game. He's strong against both the run and the pass, and I think he's a particularly good pass rusher. So he's a fantastic player. He's been the best player on the Titans defense for a number of years. What a heck of a draft pick he was. He's been a great player. He comes in number 10. Number 9 is Kawan Short of the Carolina Panthers. He could have been higher up. I wasn't enormously impressed with the start he had last season. So for me, he's been a bit of 1.5 really good seasons. But when he's on, he's as good a free technique as there is in the league. A very good first step. Plays with power. Effective in the run game when he's playing well. Can get washed out. So, as I say, early last year, none of the Panthers defenders covered themselves in glory, him included. Once he got going, we got to see him his all-pro season the year before. Saw that kind of form again when he's playing like that again. This is a player, you'll see a theme with this list. These guys can play the run and the pass, otherwise you don't make my lists. Generally, I like my players to be balanced. Especially with Starlo Tulele, I think really struggling last year. Short really did pick up the slack on what was a pretty lackluster defensive line overall. He could continue to rise up this list. He's got the big deal that he wanted. Whether that impacted some of his play last year, I'm not sure. But he should only continue to improve in his prime, and he looks like he's going to be a good one for a number of years in Carolina. Staying in the NFC South next for player number 8, and this is a guy who's flown under the radar far too long, and a player I'm very disappointed the Buccaneers didn't select back in, I think it was 2011. Cam Jordan, the D lineman for the Saints. This is a really, really good player. Again, he gets a lot of respect from me because he has not had a lot of help along that defensive front. I think Sheldon Rankins flashed last year when he got on the field. They should be a good tandem there along that front. How much talent there is in the rest of that defence, I'm a bit dubious. But he has been getting close to double-digit sacks, which is very difficult to do when you've got very little pressure coming from elsewhere. I've seen him abusing Donovan Smith over the last couple of seasons in particular. I think Smith's turned into a reasonable tackle. Still want to see him on the right side. Eventually we'll get our left tackle. But yeah, this guy, every game, the Saints defence for the last few years has been historically bad. But this guy does jump off the screen in particular. Again, plays the run very, very well. I think he's a better pass rusher than he is run player. Let's not say plays the run badly. To get the amount of pressure he does, considering teams, if you're playing the Saints, you're just thinking, we've stopped this guy, and we're probably home free for the most part, but still manages to make plays. He gets a lot of attention from opposing teams. I'm sure he's got a lot of respect around the league. Heck of a player. He comes in at number 8 on this list. Number 7, probably the first player who doesn't get a huge amount of pass rush because that's not his job, but for my money, the best nose tackle in football. Finally got the attention last year with the Giants, the former Jet, Damon Snacks Harrison. He has been a top nose tackle in the league for a number of years. The Jets defense got worse without him last year, thinking they could replace him with some of the other guys. Don't get me wrong, those three guys they've got there are all talented, but Len Williams and Mo Wilson are not suited to do that job. And whilst they can do it, they're not going to be able to do it to the level Damon Harrison can. This guy is huge. He is probably the best of the immovable object type linemen. Oh, Brandon Williams, that was the Ravens guy. Yeah, he was in close contention for this list also, and Benny Logan. I think those are probably three of the top nose tackles in football right now. But Harrison, immovable, got a bit more pressure than he would have got in New York. Adjusted well to the 4-3 scheme. Allowed, I mean, that whole D-line plays the run really well, and I think that's wonderful for the Giants when your linebacking crew is not particularly great. But Harrison had a great season, truly dominant, clogging up run lanes, making plays in the backfield. Great player, love watching him play. He comes in at number 7. Sticking in the division though, player 6, we've got Fletcher Cox of the Philadelphia Eagles. Just a heck of a player. The fact that they were trying to apparently dangle him as trade bait a couple of seasons ago for either the Titans or the Buccaneers pick is bizarre to me. I remember at the time actually wanting the Bucs to do a deal like that, but that's because I really respect Fletcher Cox's game. They got a good D-line there in Philly. This is the best player on it. Again, a lot of quickness to his game. Great first step, can disrupt plays very early on, straight off the snap. He can be in your backfield, but he also plays the run well along the way. Very disciplined player. I think he's got a lot of versatility. I think you can play him in a 3-4, 4-3, inside, outside. I don't think it matters. You're going to get productivity from this guy. No real holes in his game. Probably not got any as exceptional traits as some of the top guys on this list, but he combines a very good blend of skills. He's a very adept hand fighter in the trenches, does not get moved at too much in the run game, all while generating rush. What more can you ask for from a top tier defensive lineman? Heck of a player. Now coming in at 5 through 3 are players that for me will always be linked, because they all came from the same, burst on the scene around the same time. 2 of them being very high draft picks, 1 not so much, being an absolute steal. They've been kind of the gold standard for defensive tackles for a long time, and honestly, there is so little between these 3 in terms of what they've done in their career and their overall ability that don't look too much into where I group them. These 3 really are pretty much 3 A, B and C. So first up, Ndamukong Suh of the Miami Dolphins. I've commented previously, especially if you watch my top 100 videos, I think Suh's probably the most inconsistent of this top 10. There are games where he just does not look that interested. I thought last year was one of his better seasons in terms of that. Whilst he wasn't quite as disruptive against the pass as he has been, particularly in Detroit, where he pretty much had free reign to do what he wanted, it felt like. I thought last year he played very disciplined. Is a great run stuffer, incredibly strong. He can anchor down. He could play nose if he wanted and be incredibly effective doing it. Probably one of the strongest players in all of the league. Maybe not as quick as these other 2 guys. Not as, I wouldn't say he's perfectly suited to playing free technique, but again, he can do it because he's such an explosive, strong athlete. And as we all know, he will look to hurt guys when he tackles them. He's been a great player pretty much from day 1 in the league. And Ndamukong Suh, unplayable when he decides to be. Coming in at number 4, got Geno Atkins of the Bengals. Suffered that ACL tear a couple of years ago. Took him maybe half a season or so to get back to his old self. But then he got there and it's back to just being excellent free technique. I think he's very similar to the player who's coming in at number 3, who's, spoiler alert, is going to be Gerald McCoy. I think they're very similar players. Both can play that free technique spot perfectly because of their slightly leaner build than a lot of defensive tackles. They've both got excellent first step quickness, great burst ability to just split a guard and a centre immediately, or just rush around the outside edge of a guard and still get to the QB in time. I think last year we saw in particular, he's had okay defensive lines around him for most of his time in Cincy. Last year was probably the weakest group he's had. Still had an exceptional season. Again, this is a player good against the run, good against the pass, but really specialises, I think, as a pass rusher first and foremost. Excellent player. Took a while for him to get noticed around the league, but I think now people have realised how consistently dominant he's been. He's rated well up there. So, as I said, number 3. And again, just want to highlight, there is not much between these 3. There's not a huge amount between a lot of this top 10, to be honest, other than maybe 1 and 2, who are just that far ahead of everyone else. But Gerald McCoy of the Buccaneers, I think he's always had a bum deal. Up until this season, it looks like he's going to have a very good starting group if they can all stay healthy around him with a bit of depth to it as well. That has not been the case. He's been toiling away in Tampa with very little help to speak of beyond those few years of Michael Bennett's very early development, where you could tell he was going to be good, but apparently Greg Schiano couldn't overlook the personal differences, whatever that was. I'm not over it yet. I don't know if I ever will be. But either way, Joe McCoy, possibly the best first step of any D lineman, any interior lineman in football. Great quickness. Pretty simple, not as diverse a moveset as you may expect from a guy at this point, but he's so strong and quick that he can convert speed to power in a way that few other defensive linemen in this league can. You can see it regularly on tape, often just bursting straight through the line of scrimmage. I think he probably does that as much as anybody in the league. He can get washed out of plays. I think last year he was a lot more disciplined in his pass rushing. Previous years, guessed a little too often, could get washed out. I think you could use traps on him very effectively. I think he improved that area of his game last season. But I think he is probably the best pure free technique in the league beyond the other guy I'm going to reveal shortly. All round, heck of a player. I'm really thinking this year statistically could be that first true monster season that he's got, because he's got Chris Baker there and some help. He's been lacking that. The amount of games I've seen him break through the middle and just have a guy escape to the outside over his career, he's lost countless sacks to that. Trust me on this. But yeah, heck of a player, and representing in the jersey today. So love you, Gerald. Coming in at number 2, whether this is controversial or not, I'm not sure, but JJ Watt. Now, for my money, JJ Watt is the most disruptive defensive lineman I have ever witnessed. Bear in mind, I started watching the game sort of 99 season, and it was a bit spotty of the coverage in the UK back then for a few years. Not as all-encompassing as it is now, thanks to Game Pass. But JJ Watt is just unbelievable. For my money, probably the best defender I've seen. Takes over games in a way few others can. Puts up ridiculous numbers. You could put him anywhere on the defensive line. He's going to play it to an absolutely absurdly high level. And the reason he's coming in at number 2 is simply he's coming back off a big injury. That's got to mark him down, because there's not a huge amount between him and the next guy on the list. And if he can come back as even 95% of the JJ Watt I'm used to, or 90%, he'll be contending with the guys around him. If he comes back 100%, he'll be number 1 next year on this list. I can guarantee you that. Been warranting MVP consideration. Just huge amounts of plays, batted passes, sacks, TFLs. Everything. I've seen teams trying to triple team him at times. And next year, with the guys around him, with Clowney developing, Whitney Merciless has become a very good player. That front seven's got the potential to be absolutely hideous, and he could put up... It's hard to imagine him putting up better numbers than he has, but who knows? If he can, all kinds of records will be set. So, you can probably guess who my number 1 player is, and that is Aaron Donald of the LA Rams. He is just ridiculous. He really is. He's like a little... like him and Jarrell Casey, I think, have fairly similar builds. Jarrell Casey being the first player revealed on this list, where they're really sort of short and compact and stout. He's one of the most round-looking free techniques you'll see, and that's not because he's like that kind of fat. It's something about the way his body ends up looking. It just looks very compact, and boy is he strong and fast. I mean, really, he can do everything. Great, tears through the line of scrimmage. He's got a great first step, as I say. Maybe behind Jerome McCoy, it might not be that far off, but I think he's got a better ability to get up to a higher top speed than any of the other D linemen on this list. He can chase plays down. Plays with great ferocity. He's got that same intensity as like a guy like Sue does, when Sue decides to bring the intensity, that is. Just a phenomenal player. Again, no holes in his game, just constantly supremely disruptive. There are plays that he just sabotaged like entirely. He'll beat a double team and it doesn't matter what the play is called, run, pass, he's there getting the ball basically as it's being handed off. It's just he and JJ honestly are so far ahead, I think, of everyone else over the last couple of seasons that they have to be 1 and 2. And as I say, JJ Watt, the only question I've got is the injury. Barring other guys stepping up, these two are going to be competing for years to come. I mean, they're phenomenal players, and the fact Donald is still so young, that it's hard to imagine him actually improving on what he is at this point in his career. And if he does, then that's going to be scary because, well, he's already scary, but he's a fantastic player. I love watching him play. Rams are lucky to have him. Heck of a player. And there you have it. Those are my top 10 interior linemen in the NFL. Defensive linemen, that is. Did the interior offensive lineman last week. What do you guys think? Anything a bit controversial there? Anyone you feel should have made this list? Let me know, whether it's in the comments section below. Find us on Facebook at Cover Zero, or find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. I'm more than happy to discuss these things with you. It is my list after all, but I'm definitely interested in seeing yours if it's and comparing. As always, check out some more of the videos if you've enjoyed this one. Slowly going through all the rest of the league. Basically, I've covered all of the line spots, tackles, ends, exterior pass rushers, guards. Yeah, the lines are being covered. It's going to start moving beyond the line of scrimmage next week with these at the end of my weekly reviews. Got the Cover Who series going. I've got my new methodology for doing power rankings, because I'm not a huge fan of the standard ones. I think this one's going to be really interesting. If you've seen my franchise and draft reviews for a decade, I think that kind of scale with these power rankings, I think you guys will enjoy those, and they'll definitely be worth checking out. The first edition of that will be coming on Monday. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff would be greatly appreciated. And as always, have a great evening. Check out some more soon, and go Bucks.